Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. I have been really busy. I haven't been able to keep up with videos lately. Just a lot of things going on, and Etsy decided to make an entirely new app and it's not working, so it's just losing time trying to figure out and navigate all these bugs that keep happening in the tech world, and I'm falling behind. And I really do want to finish up this kind of series of the questioning everything, because where I am now is a lot farther than where I was in February, and a lot of questions have been answered during that time. But I feel like it's a lot of time to do one of those videos, because it takes a little bit in terms of logically thinking out the video. I actually want to be able to do something where I can screen share. I usually do everything off my phone because it's a little bit easier that way, and it doesn't clog storage on two different devices. So if you know how to do videos where people can see my screen, it would actually make things a lot easier, rather than just saying it out and say click the link below, or having to edit the video and put all these pictures in, which I don't really have time to do. But anyways, I wanted to share some thoughts as I've been watching this city change, predominantly becoming a 15-minute city. This is happening in a lot of the neighborhoods in Seattle, and I've been watching a lot of those changes happen in between the kind of lower Queen Anne, Fremont, Ballard area, where we're losing a lot of the historic charm of what kind of made these neighborhoods great, and they were also affordable places to live. To see these giant monstrosity prison-looking buildings or high-rise apartments being built that don't cultivate community, that look like modern communism, which will be a separate video in itself. They've been cut. The irony is, Amazon forced people back into work into May, or starting in May, they've been required to come back to the office 3 days a week. And so if you just look at the grid map during peak traffic times of trying to get in the city and then trying to get out of the city during the later commute times, it is just a red square between 520, I-5, 90, and then our 405. So it's just like a big red block, and it's a clusterfuck where people are, it's taking them 1 to 2 hours to get home. And the funniest part of all of this is, we live in this area where you have like bleeding heart environmentalists that don't want to pollute the planet, but none of these fucking people want to lose their job either. So they're going into work and complying, and it's kind of like, hey, working virtually for the last 3 years has worked, so why not keep it that way? Or maybe let's negotiate like a one day a week in the office or something like that. So once again, your tax dollars and the revenue is more important than the environment. It will always be that way when it comes to the government and the corporations. From what I've heard through one of my Amazon clients, whether this is true or not, but I could believe it being true, is that Amazon got a lot of tax breaks because they brought people into the city and into the downtown South Lake Union area. So it brought in a bunch of vibrancy, it brought in a lot of money to cultivate a lot of businesses. Well, since that pretty much tanked over the last few years, although people naturally have been going back to the office a little bit more in 2023, they supposedly had a meeting with the city and were going to lose their tax breaks and tax cuts, which inspired Amazon to pull people back into the office. And they followed the trend with Starbucks, as well as with other bigger, larger tech companies that are out there. So really the traffic has become mental. You're spending what used to be maybe 20-minute commute is now anywhere between 60 and 80 minutes. Just think about all that pollution and that carbon footprint that goes right out of your gas tank. And none of these bastards, because they don't have balls like the other people that worked in the hospitals, like your true freedom fighters, none of them walked off the job. None of them protested and say, hey, I care about the environment, I don't want a carbon footprint, so I'm going to stay at home. No, they didn't do that because they're too scared to lose their job, because they need their 6-figure tech income Some people that come to my classes are 29 years old, and at a higher level, they're probably making around $380,000 a year. They don't want to lose their jobs, so they're going to go back into the office, even though they only live like 5 blocks away, and it's just a quick little walk for them. But I just kind of find it funny where it's like, once again, no, you know, these people just, people are so in love with the system and in love with all these shitbag politicians that once again we have been shown that money and revenue is more important than humanity and the environment. And this is just another example, and I don't think any of them in the masses have any guts like any of your essential workers that got fired over governor mandates and all that stuff. You know, in fact, maybe we should have our governor, because he's putting in all these green acts and all this bullshit that we are getting screwed over. Maybe we should have him mandate work from home. If you can, you're mandated to work from home. Great. That would be awesome. Then we would have less people on the road. Wouldn't that be nice? Why waste a bunch of time? Why waste 3 hours of your life sitting in a car slaving for the man? Like that to me, I understand where everybody's like, oh, buck it up and go back to the office. Everybody else in America has, and I kind of get it, but I also am not an advocate for your employer owning your lifestyle and then having to go through the drudge and the sludge of sitting through mind-breaking traffic and then having to go to work and then having to deal with that on the way back. Our traffic levels may not be as bad as like New York, Chicago, and LA. I've been in traffic in those places, and once again, it is like banging your head against a wall, because it can take sometimes an hour to go 1.7 miles in the city, and it's extremely challenging. So along those lines, I had a class, and there was some younger kid from Ohio, and we were talking about, I was like, oh, I kind of didn't really mention the word 15-minute cities. I just said, hey, I kind of think it's ridiculous that, especially with the force back of coming into the office, that ironically the city has changed these neighborhoods where they've taken 3 lanes of traffic out, and now you have 1 car lane. So pretty much you had 4 lanes, maybe 5 lanes. You had a parking lane, 3 car traffic lanes, and then another parking lane. Well, that parking lane has been turned into a bike lane. Next to the bike lane is either a parking spot or vice versa. So parking lane, bike lane, 1 lane for traffic, and then you have a bus lane. So it has been reduced down. Sometimes there's not 2 street parking stations on each side. Meanwhile, when they've reduced street parking, they've also increased the garage rate. So if you want to go to the Seattle Center to, I call it Key Arena still because that's just what's in my head, but this Climate Pledge Arena, you might be paying anywhere between $30 to $50 on average to park your car in the garage to go to a concert or a sporting event. It's extremely expensive. So I've been watching, once again, the 15-minute city get created, which I think is pretty stupid in this city, because now that we've had tech colonization, in terms of human movement, unless these people have been predominantly active their whole life, like you kind of see a lot of older white men have been active their whole life, but a lot of these younger ones, they were just born and raised on technology and video games. They're oftentimes, what I've found by working in fitness, they're the lowest motivated group of people to come to any sort of fitness classes or to hire any sort of fitness trainer. A lot of actually, like the Chinese, take advantage of a lot of the free fitness classes in their buildings, so a lot of them do stay active and fit. But for the most part, this denominator of tech people, many of them won't even walk to the office. They won't walk 0.8 of a mile. They take an Uber ride everywhere. So the creation of all this extra foot traffic paths for walkers and bikers is not being used, especially because it's rainy and cold and dark pretty much half of the year here in Seattle. And really, out of everybody that I've ever worked with, working in fitness for 18 years, I've maybe had like 2 or 3 students who were year-round bikers, and they were hardcore. The only times they wouldn't bike is ever if it's been below 30 degrees and the roads and the sidewalks have been iced over. But those people actually didn't even work in tech either. They were lawyers. One was actually an environmental geologist. So as I've had this conversation with somebody from Ohio that's recently new to the Northwest, and I've seen a lot of these sweet-hearted Midwesterners and Ohioans move out here at the ages of 23, 4, 5, and 6, and eventually they become corrupt, and they move out as like a sweet, innocent little Midwest child, and then they end up getting like on drugs or just becoming really West Coasty, I guess. So this kid is like, well, in order to fight, you know, for the environment, we need to get the people off the road, and one way that we can do that is through public transportation and walking and biking. And I said, I was once there in that mentality, and guess what? When you have a child, what is the first thing you're going to do? And I told him, I said, I've watched vegan, hardcore vegan Burning Man people who were artist creatives. They did hold corporate tech jobs, but their lifestyle was everything Burning Man, from the pink hair to the very eclectic decor in their house. Didn't eat meat and all that. So they were like hardcore environmental people, walked and biked everywhere every day. And guess what? They popped out a kid. They didn't even pop out the kid. She was already like halfway through her pregnancy by the 3rd term, and what was the first thing they did? They bought a car. This 15-minute lifestyle is not practical for when you have a family, because if your child gets violently ill, you're not going to bring your child on the public bus, especially if it's an emergency. You need to get somewhere as soon as possible. There's no way you can get to school, to soccer practice, back to home, pick up another kid from art class or something like that by just walking and biking everywhere and taking public transit. It doesn't work that way. Using a car has saved me hours of my life. I used to walk and bike everywhere, and I would be stuck downtown. If I had like an hour to spare, I would just have to go to a cafe and sit there. And those days are long gone. COVID broke that shit. It's like, I'm not doing this 14-hour crap anymore. And the kid was like, after I mentioned that, he's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Now, in this video, because I do, this is like my therapy, I kind of rant about it, but I was very nice, and I did this in a very graceful and diplomatic way to bring attention to a different perspective, rather than going at it with like guns a-blazing or with a little knife and just jabbing like, oh, that's stupid, that doesn't work. So in one way, when you can come to some sort of human connection with having some form of grace or diplomacy in conversation, things tend to work. And this is a lot of what can inspire change, because what a lot of these young kids don't understand is that when they're when they're out of school, they don't have perspectives because they don't have a child. And the irony of all of this is this 15-minute city lifestyle is promoting a childless society, because who wants to live in a 500 square foot apartment, a 1-bedroom square foot apartment that's like 565 square feet? That's the average of a lot of these 1-bedrooms. Sometimes you get 650 square feet. Sometimes your 2-bedroom is 750 square feet. That's not a lot of space. You're living a very minimalist lifestyle at that point. The creation of living in these tight, small little rat cages are promoting a childless society, because 1, life is too expensive. 2, you don't have the space or the energy because you're working all the fucking time. 3, you don't have the time because you're commuting and working all the time and doing all this stuff. So all of these things are starting to go hand in hand with one another. It makes having a child undesirable because it is a different type of lifestyle as compared to what our parents, grandparents, and ancestors have been used to. Working at some of the retirement homes in Seattle, the one when I was at the Jewish retirement home, she escaped Germany in 1938, spent some time in Palma de Mallorca during, I think, the Spanish Civil War, and then came over to the States, so pretty much right at the start of World War II and some of that Depression era. But she moved here and moved to one of the hills, and she just said we moved here and it was all land. It was all land. That generation, our Depression era babies, the 1920 born, they had an opportunity to build and create a life. Some of the baby boomers had that as well. A lot of the baby boomers, I feel, were the creators in a lot of the businesses that have helped thrive. I mean, we have a lot of Victorian era businesses that are now massive corporations, you know, like Cadbury is one of them, although that's out of England. But I wanted to share that because it's like these lifestyle opportunities and choices are a lot different. Our parents also had the opportunity to buy real estate or buy a house at a somewhat reasonable price with one person as the predominant income maker. You know, a lot of these newer buildings, it's about $3,000-ish around that for a 1-bedroom apartment. It could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but generally a studio apartment is still around $2,000 to $2,400, $2,500. And then when you're looking at a 2-bedroom, then you're looking at anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000 a month, depending on what level you work in. On top, the architecture and all that is super uninspiring. So I just wanted to share that example because it's just another classic example of somebody who has really not much clue of what's going on because they're younger, their minds are a little bit more malleable, they've been maybe influenced from college. So this video might not be that sexy or super exciting or stimulating, but it is something that is going on. And a lot of times these youngsters get so passionate about a lot of these topics, but they don't have the theoretical practical experience, and that is a huge disconnect. I know with my ex-husband working in an urban planning, he always rolled his eyes at these PhD professors in urban planning because these grandiose ideas were not practical for real life situations of housing homeless or poor people or low income seniors. So there is a disconnect between the theoretical as well as the practical, and I think those things change the older you get, as well as with having a child. Everything changes. I mean, there might be some people out there who have a kid and live in a downtown, and you know, right now it seems like city life is just not really supportive for a kid. It's not even really that supportive for a dog. I mean, dogs have like no green space to go anywhere, and they're all pissing on the sidewalk, same with like the homeless people, and it's like an animal just wants to have some space too. It just wants to like run around. It doesn't want to be on a leash. So it's like we're all stuck in a cage. We're all stuck in a rat cage. And at one point, cities probably were the better place to live a little bit. I've had numerous clients that have moved to Seattle, and they moved, say, from like a suburb in Texas and actually got really healthy here and lost a lot of weight because you have to walk everywhere, or you live in a neighborhood where you can walk out of your house and go get a coffee or walk to the little side shop. So there are pros and cons to both experiences, but what we are seeing now is the manifestation of the cities becoming prison cells, essentially. So, and I don't know, everybody wants to talk about moving out to the jungle, but guess what? If millions of us start doing that, there will be no jungle. This is the hard part. It's like, what do you do? Where do you go? But hopefully I'll be able to do other videos. Just wanted to share that quick example. I actually just recently got a message from a real estate company that's owned by Blackstone to do fitness classes, and I'm like kind of paranoid about it because I'm like, have I been too outspoken? Like, are they out to get me? And it's also not really within my alignment, but I'm curious because sometimes I end up in these situations where it's life experiences. Like, people can judge that I went to Burning Man, but it was a massive life experience that kind of was the gateway to Christ. I had to see how insane everybody else was and how much hate there was for Jesus to actually make me really realize, like, wow, there's power in him. So it was a life purpose lesson to go there. All right, friends, thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. See you next time. Bye-bye.